Aloha, this is Lynn Finnegan from the Hawaii Public Charter Schools Network. Thank you for joining us. We have a visitor today, Leila, Shar, the financial performance manager, who will be helping us by walking us through the federal impact aid. And as you know, this discussion is on the table at the commission so that they can make a decision on how to release the remainder of the federal impact aid for the school year 2014-15. It is on the minds and hearts of the commission members to get this money out as soon as possible to the schools, but at the same time be able to get as much feedback and edits to this program as possible to help schools be a part of the process and own the process moving forward for releasing the funds. So at this time, I'd like to introduce Leila Shar to explain the method of the targeting process for the federal impact aid release of money. Hi, Leila.
Hey, thanks, Lynn. Okay, the targeting allocation methodology uses points and then based on total points allocates pro rata share to each school. So the components of the point calculation is based on high needs population served by the school, days cash on hand for the school as of 6/30/2014, and the high school component if the school is offering a high school program. So the biggest part is the high needs component, and that is comprised of ELL students served, SPED students, and Title I students. So going to the high needs calculation tab, every school's student population of ELL, SPED, and Title I is accumulated and totaled. Now we can count a student twice in this process if they are an ELL student as well as Title I eligible. So sometimes in some instances the total points provided to a school is higher than the actual total enrollment for the school. What happens is then we take the total points for the high needs population, total count of the high needs population, and takes it as a proportion of the total enrollment for the school, and we come up with a percentage of this high needs population. That percentage then becomes the point value for the school for this high needs population. The next piece that we look at is days cash on hand, and it is actually a negative adjustment for the schools because if you have higher, the rationale is if you have higher cash available to you, you may not necessarily need as much cash as a school who doesn't. So if you have 120 days cash on hand, which is 2 times the targeted amount, or 4 months of days cash on hand, we deducted 20 points from your score. If you had higher than 240 days, which is 4 times the targeted amount, or approximately 8 months of cash on hand, we deducted 40 points from your score. And then the nominal piece, which was the grade level for high school, we added 10 points to your score if you offer a high school program. And this is kind of similar to what the DOE weighted student formula does, in that it recognizes more additional resources are needed for high school programs. So we kind of sort of followed that. So going to the summary sheet, you then accumulate your points for high needs, for deductions for cash on hand if that was the case, and you add 10 points if you have a high school program. Then your total score is determined. Then all of the points for the targeted schools, which are essentially the startup brick and mortar charter schools, are accumulated. And then the school's points is determined as a proportion of the total points. So for example, connections with 107 points, their pro rata share of total points is 7.67%, and so that's the proportion of the total pot that they would receive, and it equates to $70,035.09, or $199.53 per pupil. And that's pretty much how we did the targeting. The caveat, though, is if your per pupil amount becomes lower than the per pupil, if it were to be distributed on a per pupil basis, you would at least get the per pupil amount. So for example, who is that? Haas, I'm not sorry. Is it Haas? It's, yeah, okay. So for example, Haas, their point value would have resulted in a lower per pupil allocation on a targeted basis, so they're getting at least 112.26, which is the per pupil amount, if this pot of money were to be allocated on a per pupil amount across the board.
So, Leila, where are you in the process with the commission right now?
So we're going to the commission in November to get their approval to distribute the funds on this targeted basis. The commission had already determined that 50% of total impact aid funds would be distributed on a per pupil basis after deducting $75,000 for labor arbitration for the schools. So the balance, the remaining 50%, is expected to be distributed on a targeted basis, and approval or decision by the commission is expected at their November 13th meeting?
Mm-hmm.
November 12th meeting on Thursday, second Thursday in November.
And they did say that if schools would like to have all the way through releasing it before the year end, that would be possible as well.
Yeah, so we're actually taking it to the commission in November so we can distribute the funds as soon as possible, considering some of the schools on the Big Island are facing issues with lava.
Okay. And so that's why they put it on the agenda ahead of time.
Yeah.
Ahead of time. But if the schools do, want to have more discussion around it and think that we need a few more weeks of discussion on it, then we can testify and ask for that. But if everyone's okay with it and there's no real changes, then we can also move forward to distribute it as soon as possible.
Yes.
Okay, great. Let me see if I have any other. Oh, could you please explain in more detail or describe in more detail about the $75,000 with the labor arbitration?
Yeah, okay. The legislature in one of our supplemental budget requests approved funding for labor arbitration because the labor AGs presented to the legislature and budget and finance that there are certain disputes that are winnable or the schools would prevail. However, the schools don't have funds to pursue the arbitration, and so they tend to just give in to the complaint, and the complainant wins. So because the legislature approved the request, however, funding for it was not provided, we thought that it would be fair to take it out of impact aid because it would be for the school's use only, and any remaining funds at the end of the year, if it's not used, would be distributed to the schools on a per pupil basis.
Okay. And so just so that, because I know that we had talked about labor, not arbitration, but we talked about collective bargaining, and for some schools there was a noticeable shortfall and that sort of thing. This $75,000 is not for those schools. This $75,000 is for an actual reserve account that in the case any of the schools have arbitration or want to take action in that way, that could be used for any of the schools.
Correct.
Okay, so that makes it, I think, a little bit clearer as to what that item was.